Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. We ask you all out there, wherever you see Joe and I on social media, help us out a little bit. Like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff that you know is going to help us so we could get our message out there. That's, of course, if you want for us to get our message out there. I don't know, Joe, how about you? I want to get our message out there a little bit. But anyway, as always, we want to thank you all. So more red meat coming your way. I will say this: if you happen to be on YouTube, you catch Joe Resinello. We started to do some shorts. We were talking about it before the show. And Joe's got some great shorts up there. If you want to go to our page, click on shorts. You'll see I got one. Joe's got like 5. And he's got all the views because he's crazier than me. See, people think he's the calm one. See, he's the one that's nuttier, not me. But we have, like I said, they're serving it up to us. So tonight we might have a couple conversations. We got a couple of outrageous things to show you, or things that we think you might want to see. One of which is we're going to talk about education, the rot of America academia. Actually, Joe, let's start there. We definitely are going to at some point. We're going to talk about Schwab. Klaus, I haven't said his name in a long time. Joe, Klaus is a scary dude. I don't care what anybody says, and we're gonna break it down. Him and his false prophet, Yuval Harari. Okay, so we're going to talk about that, and probably we're going to figure out what to throw in between. In the meantime, so we got this clip that it goes to show you that even the libs know that academia, higher education, is rotten to the core. Let's play the clip. We'll come back and we'll talk about it. And that one is
because I really think, look, we are, I think when historians look back at our time, they will not divide us into red and blue and Republican, Democrat. They're like, the things that were wrong with us were wrong with both sides in different ways. Right. I do think they manifest in a more dangerous way on the right. But on the left, there is a rot. And it comes from academia. Yes, and I agree. And it filters down. Am I wrong about that? That's where it's all coming from. I just think this is an epitome of it. This is what the mother says, and then the kid robs your money.
Yeah. So I think part of what's happening here is that we have certain institutions in our society that you can call them epistemic institutions, which just means knowledge generating. And right. the academy is the premier one, the medical establishment, the courts are another. And these only work if you have viewpoint diversity. They only work if I say something and then people are going to challenge me.
Right.
And the academy has always leaned left, and it's not necessarily a problem. The police lean right, it's not necessarily a problem. It's just people choose different careers. But what's happened, and I've been collecting data on this. I started an organization called Heterodox Academy in 2015, and we've been arguing that maybe we should have some viewpoint diversity, not be Orthodox Academy. Because when everyone's on the same side, someone says something crazy like, how about if we stop punishing people? And other people are afraid to object because that would seem to put you against a certain political sensibility. That's right.
Echo chamber, yeah.
And when that happens, what we get is what I think we can call structural stupidity.
Right.
That is, you get...
Yes. We see it all the time.
You get really smart people, but you put them together, and they can't think straight, and they say stupid things from the left that just play really well on libs of TikTok and give the right wing lots of ammunition.
And you get onion headlines as policy.
That's right. Exactly. That's it.
All right. So
Well, Bill Maher makes a certain point. We're not going to get into him too much per se, Joe, as much as the content of what they were talking about. First of all, Bill Maher, for a guy who claims to be smart, don't tell me that like bad ideas are more manifested or the more dangerous form is on the right. I get tired when he does that. I'd like to tell him for a guy who supposedly presents himself as being so smart, why don't you go read 20th century history? The rivers of blood, okay, the piles of dead bodies. Okay, the groupthink that you're railing against, okay, that all comes from the left. All of it. Okay, so I don't want to hear that. Well, the both sides do it too. But leaving that aside, Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you. You're right. There's no diversity of viewpoint, both amongst the students at the universities, amongst the faculty, amongst the books that they use. And that's what this leads to. I guess what did they call it? Structural
Structural
stupidity.
stupidity. I
Well,
like it.
well,
I may steal
now
that one.
here's what I will agree with. Okay, I agree with that. There is structural stupidity, I think, in the media where all these people are educated. Well, Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you. What do you think?
Well, they've said it on CNN. Van Jones has said it. So has what's his face, the political advisor to Clinton, the guy from Louisiana. What the heck's his name?
Carville.
Carville. He said it. He basically said the people at the University of Chicago don't speak the same language as the people in the South Side of Chicago. It's a fact. Van Jones, he said the same thing, just in a little different way. He basically said, "What's Latinx? What's not?" I don't even know what these terms mean. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Sometimes I do flip through the channels if I have a second and I'll listen just to hear what's going on, what they're saying. And they'll throw terms out. I'll be honest with you. I don't even know what they're talking about.
Can I offer you an opinion on that real quick,
Sure.
or ask you? Sometimes I think that's by design. They throw things out there that they know, number one, is are false ideas. They know that what they're throwing out there are lies and false ideas. I think they do it deliberately so that when you ask them, well, what is Latinx? What are all these things? What is this you're describing? They say, how dare you not know that? Like, I really think they do it deliberately to pick fights because they want you to just say, like Matt Walsh recently did a documentary. He says, well, what is a woman? Because it'd be like, that's just a basic example. If you ask these questions, okay, that's an indicator that you're the enemy. Now, that's just my opinion, but I agree with you. It's like, what do these things mean? And don't we have the right to ask, what does all this mean? You throw it out there like it's the truth. I don't know. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I mean, academia for a long time, they basically dwell in a bubble. I mean, and it's been like that forever. Just recently, that bubble has kind of expanded. It's almost like Port Authority kind of spilled out onto 8th Avenue all the way up to Columbus Circle. It's to be honest with you, these people live in their head. They can't get fired. They have tenured jobs. They write books. They make money on lectures. And frankly, to be truthful with you, they have a cushy gig. So they could say and do whatever they want. It's almost like it's not the real world. It really isn't the real world.
But in that case, we've made that the real. That's our fault. We've made that the real world for them. The world doesn't work that way. You have to go
No.
out there and earn a living, and then you have to prove yourself in the workplace. I don't care if you're on the radio with the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel. I don't care if you're a doctor or a lawyer or if you go into business. You go out there, you apply the things that you've learned, and you have to make your way, and you're held accountable for your mistakes. We've allowed them to create this bubble. It should have never happened. And I blame conservatives for this. There's conservatives said a long time ago, when the liberals went into the universities, when the left went into the universities, the conservative response was to go into think tanks. That was a bad move. I don't need you in the Hoover Institution. I need you at Harvard and Yale if you're an authentic conservative. Okay? I need you balancing out the leftists at the critical legal studies department at Harvard. I don't need you in a think tank. Nobody's listening to you over there. My point, Joe, is we've allowed them to create their own bubble, and then we get mad when they want to live in it, and they look at us and they say, "Shame on you! You enabled me to do this. You gave me the cushy job to tenure. You didn't hold me accountable. You let me tell your little boy that he could be a girl. You let me tell you that America was the most racist, rotten place in all of human history, and you didn't say a word to me. So don't get mad at me because I'm enjoying the fruit of my labor." Am I wrong in my assessment, Joe?
Well, I'll be truthful with you. It's also parents' fault because they pay the bill.
Well, no,
I mean,
when I
like
say us, that's who I mean. I mean
Yeah,
us.
yeah. I mean,
As
I
conservatives,
understand.
parents
Listen,
too.
not everyone has choices. There's some state schools that, frankly, that's all people could afford, and that's what they, the kid wants to go to college. That's all they could afford, and you can't begrudge a person to do that. With that said, though, and I'll speak specifically to some Catholic institutions. Look at the curriculums on some Catholic institutions. What's being taught? I have recently. There's gender studies, Latinx classes. That's in the recent school that I just looked at. I'm not going to pick on them, but
All
that's
right.
at a Catholic university.
Right.
Why would you
Yeah.
spend that
Why?
money? And
Right.
again, it comes down to what we always talk about. You notice what's happening right now with Elon Musk. Apple is using leverage, and what they're saying is we're not going to sell the app. It's not going to be available. You see, what are they doing? They're using leverage.
Right.
They do it. I've been saying this forever. There is no more shame. There is no more that's wrong. It's about power. And
Then why don't we
power,
use it, Joe? I
because
know.
people, Joe, people don't have discipline. People like they don't know what it means to live a sacrificial life. People don't, and to be honest, it's just that simple. I mean, like turn off the faucet.
Well, ultimately, the
Turn
thing is,
the faucet
I
off.
agree with you. I agree. You see, ultimately, what it comes down to, like, if you ask me, what have we said on this show before? And I'm not saying that they're the first two things, but amongst the top 10 things that we need to do in America to straighten this country out, right up there, I believe, well into the top 10, probably in the top three, is academia. So, what's the first way to do that? The first thing to do is detach the government from academia. All right. And how do you do that? Shut the spigot, close the faucet. How do you do that? You abolish the federal Department of Education and the $100 billion a year that they waste of our money, because every single state in the union has a Department of Education on the state level. You don't need the federal Department of Education. That would be a good place to start. That would be what you just said, Joe Resinello. Let's send people to, you said leverage. Okay, Apple's got leverage on Twitter. I agree with you. All right, they do, unfortunately. I hope Elon Musk has something up his sleeve to combat that. Okay, I'm sure he does, because I think
Well, he
he's
can
five
make a
steps in.
phone. He can make a new system.
Right,
He has
right.
that
So
type of
he doesn't.
money.
At the end of the day, he won't need Apple, and he'll probably find a way to leverage them. Having said that, we are the taxpayers. We allow this rotten education. And by the way, Joe, local education might be better than some higher education, in my view, but let's leave that aside. We allow this because we allow them to tell us that Harvard and Yale and Brown and Dartmouth and UPenn are the elite of the elite. You're afraid to call a woman, and a man, and I'm supposed to believe that you're an elite higher education institution in America. And when I turn around and say, you know what? My kid's probably not going to Harvard or Yale, whatever the case might be, nor would I want him to. Oh, and by the way, that money that we give you, we're going to keep that. We're going to keep that. And we're only going to send people to Washington that are actually going to take care of our money. First thing is to take that money away that we give to you and all the Ivy League. We covered it a couple of years ago, how much money. We did the breakdown. University of Washington, University of Maine, Harvard, Yale. Joe, they get billions every year. Let's start by taking that away. I think that's leverage. I think that's actually big time
Yeah, but
leverage,
is
if you
there a
ask me.
political will to do that? I mean,
But
that's
conservatives need to start showing. I guess that I cut you off, Joe. I'm sorry. Then I guess that's where I was going. Conservatives need to start showing that political will and cut off the spigot. Start with the Department of Education. Where
well,
am I wrong?
again, the reason why conservatives don't do that, or particularly like there's only a handful, is because they eat from the same trough as the Democrats. It's special interests. They get money. What you're going to start to see is as this liberal rot, and it is a rot, continues to grow, what you're going to start to see, and we're already seeing it with the same-sex marriage, like what's it called, legislation that the
This
GOP basically
disrespect for
signed on
marriage
to.
act.
You're going to start to see the GOP moving towards that direction.
Oh
Why?
yeah.
Because, but it's not just with same-sex marriage. It'll be with policies that are more like that lean more towards socialism, that'll lean more towards the global agenda. It'll lean more towards the green energy policy. Why? Because it's not about what's right for you, it's what's right for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's right for me getting power. This is no longer, you see, people don't see it. This country is not about the people. If you think that America is about you, you're just fooled. This works if you are an elitist. All this stuff is about give me your vote. Thank you very much. Sit down. That is how it works. And I'm going to tell you right now, the only people, and here's another thing, it has nothing to do with race, it has everything to do with power. Everything they want you to think it's about race. It
Right.
has the middle class African American will get as crushed as the middle class Hispanic, as the middle class white person from Hawaii to Maine. Yet somehow, people who have prescribed to their tribe continue to vote for them. And that is my biggest frustration.
Well, my biggest
Because it's
frustration is
sad.
that I don't have to have that Ivy League diploma on the wall. Okay. I mean, it's like we say all the time, and it's not just some stupid throwaway line. That's right. I got degrees in common sense all over my wall. None of this makes sense unless you're a person who is duped into believing that any of this is designed to help you, because it's not. And as you just said, I don't care what color you are, and I don't care where you're from, your ass is getting crushed. That's the bottom line.
But the proof's
Okay.
in the pudding, Joe.
Well,
It
no,
is right now. Every time people go to the gas pump, listen, is it possible that the gas companies, as a result of the spark that caused the inflation, are also making out on this? Of course.
sure.
But what was the impetus? What was the impetus? Joe Biden turned off the spigot, and he allowed the gas company to take advantage of you. If we were energy independent, this would not be going on. And
Right.
here's another thing. I'm all for green energy. We don't have the technology right now. We
Right.
don't have the power grids right now. We don't have the basic, like, you're going to get your car breaks down in the middle of like Pennsylvania, your electronic car. You're driving your kid to school in Ohio. Who's fixing it?
Right.
It's not there yet. Will it be? Eventually.
Sure
I'm
it will.
for it when it's there. So you allow them to torture you? Again, if you make $500,000 a year, you live in New Canaan, Connecticut, you have the luxury to vote for them. We'll agree to disagree. You make, as a family in the state of Connecticut, $150,000 a year, which may sound like a lot of money to people all across America, but I got news for you.
Ain't a lot of money
When
in
you're paying
Connecticut.
$20,000 a year in property taxes, it's not a lot. You make that and you allow them to beat you senseless by voting for them. I got news for you. I don't know what to tell you. And sadly, it's because of tribalism. People identify with this, and it's almost like they have to like put down who they are.
Or Joe, maybe well, let's take that one step further. I'll agree with you. I'm going to give you I'm going to say that in my heart I agree with what you just said about tribalism. Okay. That's one reason, as you're joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel. Joe, what about if people just actually want that? What if people listen, we said it before on the show. All right. I think the cause of all this, I think the cause of the reason why any policy the Democrats get away with is because they promise you they're going to keep your abortion legal. So that to me is the root of our problems. And those people who want abortion to be legal will just continue to give them their power. But Joe, some people want their slavery. Let's not ever discount that, Joe. Let's not ever discount the idea that people say, I don't want the responsibility of owning property. I don't want the responsibility of owning a car. I don't want the responsibility of owning a home. I don't want the responsibility of having a family. I just want to be me. I just want to live my life, and then I want to drop dead because nothing happens after you're dead. These are hopeless people, okay? But what about the people who say, yeah, that's just fine with me? You do whatever you want. Don't harm me. Let me have all the sex I want and let me have all the drugs I want. All right. And just leave me alone. I'm not saying that's a majority of the people, Joe, but there's some people that want their slavery. They embrace it and they welcome it. And they say, bring it on. I'm not wrong about that, Joe.
Well, it's particularly on the abortion front. I mean, we saw that with the midterms. I mean, you saw states like Montana, Kansas, Kentucky. I mean, they're hardly, California, Oregon, and Connecticut, and they all leaned towards choice
Right.
on some pretty radical legislation, particularly in Montana. I mean, listen, the sexual revolution has a death grip on America. People don't even realize that they're slaves. And I got news for you. Like I said, if that's is your driver, why you vote, don't basically don't question the fact that you can't make your bills
Right.
because the inflation's tied to it. You see, and that's sad. But you know something, Joe? That's a lot of people in life. People make peace with their demons. And what I mean by that is this in life, sadly, people come to a realization at a certain point in their life of who they are. And then they have to make a choice. You either make a choice to change, you make a choice to say, I'm sorry, or you simply just make peace with who you are. And you basically say, this is what it's about. This is what my life is. It's not going to get any better. And I have to just deal with it. And that's sad. If that's you, my message to you is this: it doesn't have to be that way. But there's people who sadly buy into that.
Or
And
or
that
or
is
as
simply sad.
it is, and or as E. Michael Jones would say, he would say that you've internalized the commands of your oppressor. And remember, Joe, the devil is your worst slave master. Okay. He doesn't tell you he's putting chains on you, he lets you put them on yourself. He watches you do it and he laughs his ass off while you're doing it by telling you he's liberating you. And these people are following that same
Well,
blueprint.
Joe, so
That
does the
same blue.
bank. I say that to my wife all the time. The bank laughs at you too. When you buy things that you can't afford, when you pay compounded interest to the point that it's absurd, buying things that you don't need because you feel like you have to have them because you don't feel like you're living up to the standard that life says you have to live up to.
Right.
That is slavery, and it's sad. It is sad, and that is a huge swath of America.
I
A
listen.
huge swath, and I got news for you. The upper classes are more guilty of that than the lower classes. They live far above their means, and they're slaves to debt. And
Yeah.
that's another, like, I say this all the time. We no longer know how to live. We don't know how to live anymore. I laugh when I see people go to any garden apartment in any state in America and look at the cars in the parking lot. 60, $70,000 cars in a garden apartment. You're never leaving the garden apartment if you're buying a $70 or $80,000 car. The
Right.
idea is you rent to save money to buy, which means you have to sacrifice, which means you'll never own a damn thing unless
But
you
I
do it.
But I hear, Joe, I hear what you're saying. And I also hear people out there who might be listening to us at the front line with Joe and Joe, and they're saying, well, Joe Rossinello and Joe Pasillo, particularly you, Joe Rossinello, you're being awfully judgmental.
It's
So
not, it's an
what?
observation.
No,
It's just an
I'm not
observation.
saying that
I'll be
about.
honest with you, Joe. I swear, that's your business. That's the people's business. If you want to suffer, that's your business. I'll leave you alone. But I have eyes, and I'll tell you this right now. I'll solve your problem. I'll be honest with you. A
Joe,
lot of people.
Joe, I want to just take that one step further. Listen, I say this respectfully. They don't need you to solve their problem. No, real quick. They know how to solve their own. Don't ever think that people don't know exactly what they're doing. My larger point about slavery was I think they embrace it.
They
I
do,
really do.
but Mike, then don't complain. You see, to your point, like then say when you can't afford your bills, when something goes awry and you lose your job, which happens to people, it's part of life.
Happens
It's part
every
of
day.
life. Then you're not being an adult.
Right.
Like you're an adult. Like this should have been taught to you. I laughed. Life coaches. Life coaches. That's your mother. And
Yeah.
she's your life coach, your father. And now you're an adult.
Joe, there you go again. It's birthing
No, but
person,
it's
Joe.
sad. It just shows how our society has broken down. In a healthy society, there's no need for a life coach. Your
Well, Joe,
mother and father were your life coach. Then you grow up
well,
and
I
then you
don't
live your
understand.
life like an adult.
I don't understand how the children of, let's say, people who would be our grandparents, their age, okay, how people our parents' age, maybe a little bit younger. Let's bring it a little bit younger. Because my father was born in 1935. Your father was born in what?
36.
Roughly 36. I'm not talking about that generation. I'm talking about the baby boomers after World War II. Those are probably, let's say, around 70, 75 years old now. They're the ones that allowed this. They talk. I know people like this. They talk about how much respect they have for their parents and all the hard work and all the hard work that they did. In the meantime, whenever anybody talks about the things that, let's say, for those same values and principles that our grandparents employed, okay, those are the things that are poo-pooed. So I again, they talk out of both sides of their mouth, but I think it's like you said, you want to act like an adult, okay, then you have to stop talking like a child. Now, we have a clip that I want to play. I'm not going to call anybody names on the show anymore, Joe. I promised I wouldn't. I'm not going to be I'm trying not to be the angry guy, even though it's very difficult not to get angry nowadays. All right. But I'm trying not to be the angry guy. But now watch this exchange and watch what this one guy says. All right. You'll see in a second who it is. Talking about drag queens. Jonathan, play the clip, please.
How significant are those two dates?
Yeah, and also hours before what they called an all-ages drag brunch, which is probably the number one target of these anti-LGBTQ events recently. Like, for example, the Proud Boys will go and protest any drag brunch, any drag story hour, anything that a child might go to meet a drag queen, not just to show them that they're human beings and people. They go there and they read Dr. Seuss there. They read regular books, but it's read by a drag queen, and they have breakfast. It is not some hypersexual event, but that's what it's viewed as on the far right. And these spaces have become dangerous places of real-life information warfare. There's Proud Boys showing up on one side. Sometimes people like local Antifa members show up on the other side as a way to. It becomes a place where kids aren't safe, not because of the event itself, but because of this culture war that's been propped up on top of it. And that's not something that should happen. This is not something, these people should be able to live their lives without fear of being murdered, literally. But right now, that's the sort of climate that's been created by anti-LGBTQ protesters and, frankly, bigots.
Now, here's my response on one level, Joe, before I get into it, to Mr. Collins, okay? I don't want a drag queen around my kid. I need to go no further than that and explain myself to you, nor to the drag queen. I don't want the drag queen around my 6-year-old, if I had a 6-year-old, okay? Or my 10-year-old, or my 15-year-old. I don't care if they're reading Dr. Seuss. It is hypersexualized, Mr. Collins. You think that we don't know how to read. You think that we can't use our eyes. You don't think we've seen the images of them with their legs open, all right, and their crotch hanging out in front of 5-year-old kids. It's disgusting to think about. But now here's the point. My desire to keep disordered people away from my children, okay, if I had young kids like that, that makes me the cause of these poor people getting shot at this gay nightclub. That's where people like him are disgusting and dishonest, because it is not anti-LGBT blah, blah, blah to say, I don't want a drag queen reading Dr. Seuss to my child. And Joe, I ain't apologizing. And they could call me or you or anybody else a bigot all they want. Kids don't know how to process that. I wanted to show that clip, yes, to be a little outrageous, but to tell Mr. Collins, it is hypersexualizing the kids.
Well, it's also, I don't think it's being anti-LGBTQ anything as a parent who's making that decision. To your point, he's not being honest. And frankly, I don't hate anybody. But at the same time, I have every right to not subject my children to certain behavior. That's my right as a parent. And you have no right, Mr. Collins, to throw that down a child's throat, to basically try to justify your own existence or life. Sorry. You want to do that on your time? That's your business. You're free to do it. I think it's a bad choice, but you're free to do it. Why is it that I'm not free to make that decision for my child that's a minor? If you said that 10 years ago, they would have laughed you off that interview. Everyone, even liberal channels. Now, even the medical association buys into it. Mind you, the medical association 10 to 20 years ago would have said the exact opposite. Oh, science, it changed. It changed.
Right.
It is sad. You know, the best analogy that I heard about what is going on with this like trans movement is this. It's the modern day lobotomy. And what do I mean by that? In the 50s, if people had mental illness, they gave them lobotomies. Like in the movie One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Clearly, that's not done anymore. It's a barbaric operation and a barbaric procedure. And now this is now normalized. Countries, and look it up, like France, and I believe it could be Denmark, it's a Scandinavian country, they were on this train 20 or 30 years ago, particularly with children, are now backing away from it because they've seen the consequences of it. That's not talked about because no one has guts. No one has guts. As I always say, everyone wants to be invited to the party. No one has guts. Period. End of story. You'll have an adult talk to a kid that's 8 years old, a principal, and you're going to try to convince him without telling your parents that he or she could transition to another gender, and then you're going to go home and kiss your wife and kiss your kids. What is that?
Right.
I
No.
would rather pick up garbage with my hands in the street to make money before I did that. To manipulate a child because Rachel Maddow said I had to. Sorry, not doing it.
And you know what's
And
funny
I'll sleep perfectly fine not doing it. Call me whatever you want. Sleep perfectly fine.
Well, remember something. At the end of the day, you can make the best argument. I mean, this is one of the things, Joe, that we've said, ad nauseum on this show for the last 4 years. You can make the best argument. We are beyond. You know what all of this is teaching us. I think this is what did Barry Obama call it, Joe? Barack Obama, the greatest president in U.S. history, by the way, Barack Obama. They'll have you believe that too. Okay, now I lost. now I lost my.
No, but Obama wouldn't have been for this.
No,
because he couldn't say it. Because it wasn't politically correct when he was the president.
Remember something.
This could not have even flown when he was the president.
Joe Biden is the one that actually let.
No, but there's three genders. Joe Biden from Scranton, Pennsylvania. That could have been the stupidest thing I've ever one of.
Right.
Politically speaking. Right. I can't. And we let them get away with it. Joe, I'll be honest with you. It is nothing short of a mockery. You listen to the clips, you watch what's going on. Pennsylvania elected a man that had a stroke. Joe Biden, whatever your political affiliation is, I don't care. Joe Biden is not cognitively alert all the time. And if you look me in the face and you say that he is, I'm sorry, you're not being honest or objective. There are moments, and I have seen numerous of them, and so have you, where he's in left field, dude. He looks like, and I've been to nursing homes. You see that guy in the hallway at the nursing home.
Right.
That is who is the president of the United States. It's an embarrassment. Listen, you don't have to like Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. Our politics is a mockery. It is a joke. The whole world knows it, and I'm embarrassed, and
No,
so should you be.
listen, yes, I am embarrassed, but you know what? Not completely, for the simple reason that the rest of the world is doing this too. We're going to talk in a little bit about Klaus Schwab, okay, and that's China as our role model. We have nobody to be embarrassed in front of Joe because all the nations of the world are all going in the same direction, maybe except for African countries. God bless their hearts, okay, that aren't buying. They're not buying this nonsense. But one thing I was going to mention to you, I got a little off track, but I did want to mention this to you. That's why, Joe, we've been saying on this show, we've moved beyond debate. Why? Because we're unwilling to debate, we're unwilling to defend our position, we're unwilling to promote our position. Joe, we're Roman Catholic men. I don't fear anything. I don't fear debating anybody about anything. If I'm not equipped to, I'll find another Catholic that will be able to, is equipped to argue with you about these things. But that's not the point. The point now, Joe, isn't whether or not you have even truth on your side. Truth doesn't matter right now. It always matters, Joe. Truth always matters. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe what I'm saying. But on this political and level of culture war, I'd like to tell Mr. Collins, yes, Mr. Collins, but you started the culture war and people like you, not us. Okay. My point is, Joe, we're at the stage of political power now and political will. Debates don't matter. If you look at the abortion arguments, the pro-life arguments, truthful arguments rooted in natural law, morality, philosophy, biology. The pro, I'm just using this as an example, Joe Rossinello at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel. All of the arguments made the left look like a bunch of little 5-year-olds who didn't know how to even speak. Okay. But obviously, arguments don't win the day.
No, they
Political
don't.
will. Political will. I don't have to argue with you. I don't have to argue with you if you, as a librarian who get public municipal money, state money, to hire somebody to come in and read to these kids. I don't have to argue with you that I don't want a drag queen in there. What I'm going to say is no. When they try to argue, I'm going to say, up, 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 up. I'm not arguing with you. It is a fruitless venture to argue with these people. What we need in 2022 and moving forward is political will to stand up to them and say the answer is no, especially on this issue, especially with kids. They did it in Virginia. God bless them. Okay. And it's, as you say, this is a loser because it involves kids. But Joe, they don't care. They're going to keep going. And what we have to do is say, I'm not arguing with you anymore. There is no need to. We've won every argument. You'll never win an argument. What we are saying to you is the answer is no. Now, please back off. And if they don't stop backing off, we need to start holding people accountable as far as who we're putting in our local mayor's office, in our local school boards, and everything else to put a stop to this nonsense. Because that's what it is. It's just nonsense.
Well, it's funny. I was on dropping my kid off in nursery school, and I was listening to two parents talk, and they were talking about setting up. I kid you not, I'm not making this up. I didn't comment. I was just listening. Like a schoolhouse, paying money and setting up, because basically they were looking at the Catholic school. It may be expensive down the road, and they didn't want to send their kids to the public school, but they were saying, like, we could pay somebody, like, if we pooled our money to educate these kids. And that's what people have to do. You see, there's many ways to skin a cat. If you cannot win in the political arena, and sadly, the way it's looking, particularly with the election laws in many of these states, they're making it impossible to win. So what you do is you drop out while being in the world, and you create those little circles, community schools. Listen, thanks, but no thanks. We're not buying in. We're not sending our kids. We're going to take care of that. Thank you. Thank you. I'll smile at you if I see you across the street. I'll be nice to you. I don't hate you. I won't hurt you. I won't even say a bad thing about you. But I'll tell you what, you're not going to indoctrinate my kid. You don't like my ideology? Fair enough. Fine. Well, I don't like yours. And I have every right to not like yours because I do live in America. At least right now, I can say that. And I'll respect you, but I will make you respect me by the law. And that is what you do. You step out. I mean, not everybody, and Joe and I, through our interview show on Veritas Catholic Network, we're going to be talking to some folks that are trying to revitalize Catholic education soon. Joe, that's coming up, that interview. That has to be priority number one by the bishops, because it should not be only available to people who have money.
All right.
Most people who go to church don't have money, by the way. That's globally. It shouldn't be a privilege that your kid gets a Catholic education. That's a shame.
Well, Notre Dame as a university was never that school was never founded for elites that could afford, at least adjusted for inflation, 60, 70, 80 grand a year. Notre Dame was set up as a school that middle class and working class immigrants, Catholic immigrants,
Oh,
could send their children. Those days are long gone. And
no,
let me tell you something.
80,000 a year.
I don't ever beat up on bishops. I don't do it. Okay. But I will remind them that when you fail in your mission, particularly when it comes to education of children, when you can actually go and take an LGBT class at a place like Notre Dame or Seton Hall, okay, or any of the Catholic schools out there, okay, you're going to have to answer to Jesus for that. You're going to have to answer for it, not me. I have my own sins. I'm going to have to answer for. And the problem is too, and we won't get into it in this show, is the hierarchy of the Catholic Church in America. Let's hope Bishop Broglio, I think that's his name. He's the new head of the USCCB. All right, Joe, am I right about that? Bishop Broglio?
That's his name.
He seems to be sounding a little bit more, I hate to say it like this, orthodox. Okay, we'll see.
They got to give the money back, Joseph. They get too much money from the federal government. That was the smartest thing ever done by America.
Well, the thing about this disrespect, Joe, there's only one problem I have with the tax exempt status. Only one is that I want it to be taken away. I do, because I want them to detach themselves.
They're going to take it away anyway.
But here's the thing. It's got to be equally, if it happens to the Catholic Church, it has to be equally applied across the board. That means if a Catholic church is sitting on one square block in Midtown Manhattan and you have to pay the exorbitant property tax in New York, well, the synagogue has to, the mosque has to, the Protestant church has to. It has to be applied equally then. You can't charge the Catholic.
What it's going to do is this. There's certain Christian schools, Christian denominations. I see them when I drive through this one town near me. They do support the LGBTQ agenda. Now, clearly, that's not biblical. I'm just, again, not my opinion. It's not biblical. And this is what's going to separate the sheep from the goats. Remember, when Henry VIII wanted to get married again, all the bishops signed on, except one or two. One. It was Fisher.
I think St. John Fisher was the only
one. Because, again, listen, it's hard to do that. I'm not saying that that's an easy thing. I would be lying, and I'll be truthful with you. If I was ever put to the fire like that, to that degree, you don't know how you're going to react.
I agree.
Like, in all honesty, it's easy to say, this is how I'd be. You don't know, because that's real. John Fisher was killed. But the point is, and in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, in Mexico, this is not too long ago, within 100 years, these things happened. The thing is this, it's going to separate the sheep from the goats. And ultimately, Joe, listen, what people don't think about, they don't consider it. You're going to die and be judged. Everyone. There's an older gentleman, an Italian guy I know from Hoboken. He works with the Missionaries of Charity. I saw him this particular year at Mother Teresa's feast day. This is what he says to me. Joe, the road to heaven is narrow. And I thought, people think Vinny's crazy. Well, he is a little bit, but he's right.
Right.
The road to heaven is narrow. And you're either on it or you're not. And that means to be honest with you, you're not following the crowd. If you're following the crowd, bet that you're going the wrong way.
Right.
And that is the truth. And people don't consider that. They want an easy life. They want comfort. And I got news for you, my friends. Anyone who hears my voice, that's not the path to heaven. Self-sacrifice is the path to heaven. And Jesus
Well,
Christ showed it. And if you want to get there, you have to die to yourself and you have to live a selfless life. And if you don't, I got news for you. And I'm not judging you. I'm telling you the truth. You're going to be deeply disappointed.
well, Joe, not for
Deeply disappointed.
I know you're obviously talking about what the ultimate meaning and purpose of life is, which is to go to heaven. But I would even take it,
Right.
but I would even just take it down in terms of your own life, even if you don't think there's a heaven and a hell. If you're not willing to, if you know that all these things are wrong, if you know that everything like drag queens to reading a story to your 5-year-old, if you believe us and you agree with us that there's something wrong with that, then yeah, you're going to have to sacrifice a little. That means that your libtard friends are not going to invite you over for Grey Goose and Foie Gras because you're against this. If you have the balls to say what you know to be true, which is marriage is between one man and one woman, you're not getting invited to the barbecue. And you even on that level, you have to be willing to say, you know what, I don't want this for me and my family. Knows I'm not going to sit here and admit that all these things are now acceptable. When did they become acceptable? 10 years ago, like you said, or because the Supreme Court said so, or because Hollywood said so, or because the New York Times said so, or because MSNBC said so, or because Bill Gates said so, or about Klaus Schwab said so. That's a perfect segue, Joe, right into our next clip. John, roll it.
You were there meeting some of the leaders as well. Professor Schwab, what do you make of the result? Finally, they put something as a statement, and it seems quite positive with all the voices included.
I think it's positive. It's already positive through the fact that everybody agreed about the statement, which we haven't had the last years. Now, the base has been formed, but we have to go one step further. We have to have a strategic mood. We have to construct the world of tomorrow. It's a systemic transformation of the world. So we have to define how the world should look like, which we want to come out of this transformation period. I respect China's achievements, which are tremendous over the last over 40 years. I think it's a role model for many countries, but I think also we should leave it to each country to make its own decision what system it wants to adopt. And I think we should be very careful in imposing systems. But the Chinese model is certainly a very attractive model for quite a number of countries.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Dead in the waters in the chat room. He said it right. He said, I put it up on the screen. Not this disgusting animal. That's classic. People might say, like, they might say something like, oh, there you go again, you Joe and your audience. You're calling people names. Klaus Schwab is one of the most evil men I've ever listened to. Why? Because you know why, Joe? Because he's not he's not saying these things because he knows them to be true. He's saying these things because he knows they're a lie. He knows that this base that is being created, that he describes, this structural transformation, he's promoting this. What are they promoting? Because when they talk about this new world order, they don't call it that. They call it ESG and whatever. Just Dead in the Water's right. He goes, he has no soul. Well, Dead in the Water, let's say this. He's got a soul. The problem is he's a lost soul. Klaus Schwab and his little sycophant, Yuval Harari, okay, their model is the model that all tyrants want. Okay, this is nothing new. Remember Ecclesiastes, okay? There is nothing new under the sun. No truer statement was ever made. There is nothing new under the sun. It goes back to the beginning of time. There are those who wish to not just be wealthy, not simply to prosper, but they want to be prosperous and they want to be wealthy and they want to thrive on the expense of others. We've had slavery goes back to the beginning. I like to break it to a lot of people. It doesn't go back just 300 years. It goes back way to the beginning. Okay. And the impulse of the slave master used to be, well, I have power over you. And I either beat your people in war, I conquered them, I take you as a slave. I don't care if it was Africans doing it to Africans, American Indians doing it to American Indians, Europeans doing it to Africans. I don't really care about race. That's not underlying it all. What underlies it all is one group of people says, I have power over you, and they enslave you. Klaus Schwab is a slave master. When he says he has power over you, he has true power over you. Why? Because of what we say on this show all the time. Because they sell you what they want you to think of as freedom. But in the meantime, what they're doing is they're selling you the chains that you're going to put on yourself. Joe Resinello.
I can't help it, dude. That was the craziest thing I've heard.
What's that?
This filthy animal.
Disgusting animal.
That is insane.
Hey, listen. Listen.
Dude, but I'll tell you, Joe, know what it is? They bought into the climate cult. I mean, I'm not saying, listen, I want to take care of the earth. I'm all about it. I recycle. I don't want the earth to heat up. But if you actually think, I was saying this to my wife on the way to church, the hubris of man that you're going to control the climate. Could we do better? Sure. Of course, we could do better. Let's try to do better. You actually think you're going to stop the earth if the earth is in fact heating up. I'm not a scientist, but if it is in fact heating up, you think in your hubris that you're going to stop it? That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Or worse yet, you're making it seem like if I drink Coke out of a plastic bottle, in other words, that somehow, or if I drive a combustion engine vehicle, okay, that somehow that, like if I drove a Cadillac, that's going to contribute to the problems like global warming or whatever the case might be. Are you nuts?
Well, is it possible that we could have cleaner energy? Yes. Listen, I'm not a
No, I'm not
science
even talking about that.
denier.
I'm with you on the hubris part. I'm only on the hubris part.
I just
Have you
laughed at
looked
that.
up at the sky? Have you looked at the vastness of the ocean? Have you looked at the size of the mountains? You ain't destroying the earth,
That's
John
right.
Kerry.
And here's another thing. If the earth is in fact heating up, you're not stopping it.
You're not doing anything.
You're not stopping it, Al Gore. Sorry, you're not. If that's actually going to happen, guess what? It's going to happen.
Right.
And could we do better? Yes, let's strive to. I always say this. We're stewards of the environment as Catholics. We are that's actually a commandment. We're supposed to be stewards of the environment. But if that means sacrificing human beings, the environment is there for us to use to help humanity. It's now an idol over humanity.
Right.
They're going to make you, it's funny. A friend of mine from high school was talking about something recently. I was just like, dude, meat is soon to be so expensive that only Klaus Schwab can eat it. And by the way, he will. And people like him who could afford $30 a pound for chopped meat. You know what they want you to eat? And I'm not making it up. Look it up. Bugs.
Right.
If you said that 10 years ago, they would have laughed at you. But that's real.
But they said it.
Everybody.
They said it, Joe. They said that insects have protein. I ain't eating insects.
Nor am I.
I
would just be a vegetarian. I would just eat.
And on a political level, that's one thing that's got to happen in 2024. Something's got to happen. We need to get back to energy independence. And I think people are tired of it. But here's the thing. Let's leave that aside for a second. Joe, China's a role model.
Oh, China.
Joe and I recorded a video earlier today with David Penault. It'll be available on the Veritas
tomorrow,
Catholic
actually. Gonna
Network,
be
probably
aired
tomorrow. Okay. Where we were talking about China. Klaus Schwab says China is a role model, a brutal communist dictatorship. You know why he says that, by the way, Joe? You know why he can actually get away with saying something which is so obviously stupid and idiotic? Because if you see pictures of the Chinese, they're happy. But you want to know why they're happy? Because they're slaves. They have a social credit score. Their corporations are run by under ESG governance. In other words, they're all LGBT. They're all these things. In other words, in the meantime, you got Uyghurs that are in cages. In other words, and being used for slave labor. You have Cardinal Zen that's under arrest. Okay, you have the Catholic Church is underground, worse than it was under Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth I. So the thing is, China is a role model, really, for this transformation, this structural transformation that you're talking about, Klaus. In other words, tell me what I'm supposed to love about it. Tell me what's supposed to be so great about it. I don't want to eat your. And here's real quick, Joe. And here's the other thing too. If it's so effing great, why are there so many effing people protesting that?
Well, the interesting thing in the news recently was, as a result of the COVID lockdowns in China, there was a fire and people died because they couldn't escape their apartment. And as a result, there are protests. So even in China, basically, I think the lesson there for the world is, if you push people far enough, even in China, they will take to the streets. That is nothing short of insane. But here's another thing. Regimes like China, and I hate to say it, even the regime that is currently governing our country, they don't care about people. And they'll say, wow, you're crazy. No, I'm not. They are willing to abort a child in the 9th month of pregnancy. That is barbaric. In the state of Montana, you could terminate a child that survives an abortion. You don't care about people. That's disgusting. This is where we're at. Are we any better than them? I don't know. And that's why, I'll be honest with you, Joe, I can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves. We can't help anyone that doesn't want to help themselves. If you can't face these realities, and they're real and it's not fake news, then I can't help you. But I'm going to tell you who I am going to help: me. And I'm going to help my wife and my family. That's my prerogative. You're free. God does not impose, he proposes. And so does Joe and Joe. There's a better way. You don't want to take it? I don't know what to tell you. I have nothing but sorrow and feel pity for you. And that's the truth. Because
we have to leave it there. We have to leave it there. Joe Resinello on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room is always open, crusadechannel.com/chat. So we're on Mondays, I believe, on the Crusade Channel, Monday nights on the Crusade Channel. Also, wherever you see Joe and I at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, primarily the Frontline with Joe and Joe on YouTube for now. Primarily the Frontline with Joe and Joe on YouTube. Where you see our page, please hit a like, please hit a subscribe, please hit a share if you like the videos, okay? And encourage others to subscribe to our channel. That'll help us to defeat the algorithms over at YouTube. And we are building up other channels with the hope of eventually leaving YouTube. Did you hear that, you little YouTube geek sitting in front of the computer waiting to take Joe and I down? Did you hear that? Okay, eventually we're going to leave you. And you can't take us down for saying that. So anyway, remember until the next time that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon. Securing your data privacy is more important than ever. Start your free privacy scan and see how much of your data is being sold on the internet. Dataseal.io is the best and most affordable way to secure your data from ending up in the wrong hands. Remove your data today from the internet with Dataseal.io. That's Dataseal.io.